Hi everyone, this is AJ and welcome back to my show. Today we're going to be talking about what the independent or indie film scene in India looks like. Okay, so first things first, when you talk about filmmaking or films in India, they generally tend to be categorized as Bollywood and then everything else. But everything else also has a massive part of it that makes up the Indian film industry. So you have, of course, parallel cinema, you have art house, and then you have indie film. Now, the thing about indie film, even though everyone claims to love it so much, is that they don't often know how it's actually defined or what makes up an indie film. But the truth is, it is quite difficult to break down, so that's what I'm going to try and do for you here. So the first thing is that an indie film is produced outside a major film studio. The second thing is that it usually contains content or characters that wouldn't otherwise be explored in mainstream cinema. So it takes into account a lot of the filmmaker's vision, their own way of producing it, how they want to kind of show a certain story without taking into account maybe other factors that would play a big role within mainstream cinema. The third thing is that it typically has lower budgets. And the fourth is that it uses different distribution and marketing channels than a mainstream film studio or mainstream film would. So I'm going to get into the fourth point a little more, so just you understand that a little better. So the way a non-indie or mainstream film would technically or typically work is that you have their producers with their own distributors ready in place the moment the film is made to go and distribute it across platforms, across your theaters, across TV. But you have to have obviously a lot of money for that. So in the case of indie filmmakers, their usual route is to submit it to film festivals. And from those festivals, depending on the response they get and the kind of offers they get there, they will then look for other platforms to distribute or to put out their content on. The second way that independent filmmakers distribute their films is to go up to the distributors themselves and then offer to back their own films by putting their own money on the line, saying that if you screen our film at this time, at this place, whatever it is, then we'll be able to compensate you from our own pockets. And then the third way that a lot of people and a lot of films are picking up now is, of course, crowdfunding. So they will crowdfund the amount of money that it takes to distribute their films in the most wide way possible. Now, there's a second problem. Now, all these four things, of course, are the things that generally make up or define an indie film. But the third point, which was about budgets, is a super relative concept, right? Because what really constitutes a lower budget film? So I was trying to figure this out and I was talking to a couple of friends of mine and they came up with something really interesting that I want to share with you guys, or which has kind of influenced at least the way I look at or understand now indie cinema budgets, is that it depends on how you spend the money and your budget. So for example, what really makes up a high budget film, or where does that money go? So the first thing, of course, is famous faces. The moment you have well-known actors on set, you're going to have to pay them well. Second is expensive gear. Third is long shoot schedules. Four is visual effects. And five is, of course, like I said, distributing and marketing. Now, if you don't use these five things and you still meet the criteria of the other 4 points that I'd mentioned, then most likely you have an indie film on your hand. So I can't talk about the indie film scene in India without mentioning some of the people and production houses that have been instrumental in it existing in the first place. You have Sikya Entertainment, which is Guneet Monga's production house, which has produced the likes of Gangs of Wasipur, Haram Khor, Lunchbox. And then, of course, you have Drishyam Films, which first came to the spotlight in, I think, 2014 with Aankho Dekhi, and then has followed up with absolute masterpieces like Masan, Newton, Waiting, and so on. Then you have the indie filmmakers themselves that have been responsible for upholding the mantle of the indie space for the last couple of odd years. So just to give you a clearer idea of what an indie film actually looks like once it's been produced and created and put out there for everyone to watch, I'm listing out a list that has been compiled based on my own favorites as well as those that have been recommended to me by others. So you guys can take a look and see what you think. So the first one is Gitanjali Rao's Bombay Rose. It's coming out on Netflix soon. It's an animated film that she's created in a co-production, I think, with a couple of independent studios. Then the second one is Arun Karthik's Nasir. The third one is Neeraj Ghewan's Masan. The fourth is Achal Mishra's Gamak Ghar. The fifth is Chaitanya Tamhane's Court. Sixth is Anand Gandhi's Ship of Theseus. Seventh is Kaka Muttai, which is M. Manikandan's film. And eighth is Visaranai, which is Vetri Maran's film. So this particular list isn't based on any preference or any order per se. It's just a group of films, each of which show a very different side of Indian filmmaking and a very different side of Indian culture, so to speak. And each of them hold a very special place in my heart. And as always, I'd love to know what you guys think. What you guys think about indie film, if there's something you think I've missed in terms of what else classifies as an indie film, and of course some more films that I'd love to watch that you guys can recommend to me. But as always, thank you for watching and see you next time.